Welcome to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is to help you create an ecosystem of academic excellence. What does that really mean? I know for the last few weeks, if you haven't seen our last few episodes, we've been really talking about contagious culture, building quality schools, giving teachers models on how to improve and impact students more in the classroom. But what is this idea of creating an ecosystem of academic excellence? Well, when you think about an ecosystem and just living organisms, everything works together, and we need multitude of different things to work together to live our lives. And when you think about building a great school, whether it's in the classrooms, in the school buildings, we need each other. We need our parents. We need our students to show up and be ready to roll. We need teachers that are committed to the craft. We need leaders that are humble but visionary leaders. We need boards that support schools, and we need all of these different factors and all of these pieces to the puzzle. One of the things that I've always believed about myself is that I am yet and only a puzzle piece to a bigger puzzle. What that means is that my impact and my contribution and my gifts and my worthiness and my value that I contribute to the world isn't going to save the whole world. But if I look at another teacher, or if I look at a person walking down the street, or if I look at my friends and my group of individuals that we build, each of us collectively works together in a way to create and impact this world in the ways that we've been called and gifted to impact the world. And when we think about this ecosystem of academic excellence, it's important if we all contribute in the ways that we need to contribute. If parents begin to show up and support their children at home and support their teachers in the classroom, it makes teachers feel more supported, as well as children. If children ask questions and are in environments where they can feel seen and feel heard and feel respected, they're able to engage with their lessons more. If teachers feel supported from their leaders, come to school prepared, come to school with a positive attitude and a growth mindset, it allows them also to be able to deliver that lesson better. If leaders actually want to lead people, want to have those crucial conversations, continue learning about the various crafts, then it allows them to stay ahead of the curve and innovative. If board members actually look at schools from not just a financial or a fiscal responsibility, but also a life responsibility to impact children, then we all start with heart. And we're allowed the opportunity and the privilege to be able to transform schools. Now, I know I'm the culture guy, and I believe that culture is the beginning of transformation in our school systems, in any organization. If kids don't want to learn, if teachers don't want to teach, if leaders don't want to leave, then how are we going to create content, care about curriculum, and get our school to be able to achieve academic outcomes? It's not possible. So today we're going to be talking about 7 culture tips. Just 7 tips. It's going to be quick. I want you to bear with me, and I want you to use these over the next 7 days if you have the opportunity. And I want you to create the opportunity in your school or in your organization so that you could be able to implement these various things that we're going to be talking about today. All right, let's go over tip number 1. Tip number 1 is to celebrate a team member publicly. Super simple, right? But earlier, maybe 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity. I was walking into Harris Teeter with my family, and right when I walked into Harris Teeter, I saw this huge picture as one of the employees of Harris Teeter, and it says Service Excellence Award, honoring that person for service within Harris Teeter. Now, it may be small. I didn't know who she was, but I know that every time that she probably comes into Harris Teeter, she may be A, embarrassed, but 2, feeling valued, feeling important, feeling that her contributions meant something. And I think it just does something to a person when you are able to communicate in a public setting how they showed up in that lesson. Or how, hey, thank you, Miss Davis, for being able to impact your students this week by lesson planning and doing this field trip. Thank you for your contribution, Mr. Johnson or Dr. Johnson, for these various things that you're doing. It doesn't just help that person. What it also does, and if you look at our last episode, Building Schools of Excellence, if you look back at last week's episode, what this also does is it models what what is expected from other people. It models what we're trying to create in our school. It models and celebrates excellence on a school level. So I want you to write down one person that did something well either this week, last week, or today. And I want you to publicly celebrate them, whether in the next staff meeting, on a Zoom call, in a newsletter, on a social media post, in a group chat. I want you to identify somebody, and I want you to celebrate that person. Number two, when we think about walking away, I think sometimes walking away is the most powerful thing that you can do when people in education are doing what? Complaining and gossiping. Last week, I had the opportunity of having an educator brunch where I invited a few educators in my network to my home where we cooked, we fellowshipped, and we talked about a lot of the challenges that we're seeing within the school system, but I did not allow the gossip. I did not allow the complaining, because one of the things that I've learned from a mentor of mine is when you communicate a complaint, you also have to cultivate a solution. When you communicate a complaint, I need you to help that person cultivate a solution. In a lot of our school systems and a lot of our organizations, gossip is allowed. And when gossip is allowed, it feeds into the culture and creates a disease that hurts the overall academic, social, and overall outcomes of that school system. When you communicate and when you allow this gossip and complaining to happen, rather than redirecting it, and working with that team member to either identify a solution, identify the specific root of the issue, or be able to coach them back to the expectation or that vision of excellence, then you are saying and you are agreeing with them that, hey, having a positive culture, having positive outcomes academically in this school, having an environment that is positive and upbeat and innovative, having creative solutions, developing leaders is not important. When you communicate and allow gossip, you're communicating and saying all of those things. Number three, share a personal resource. I think this is probably one of the most important steps in the 7 culture tips that I'm going to give you today. Sharing a personal resource. So many times in education as a whole, we're not seeing people. We're seeing titles. We're seeing professions. We're seeing teachers, we're seeing leaders, we're seeing assistant principals, and we're not actually taking the time to see people. There was a time in my educational career where a friend of mine, I would call her a friend at this point, a friend of mine was sharing that she wasn't all the way in education. She wanted to do other things, and she didn't really know if this was the best fit for her. And I think it's a lot of times where we have these types of conversations and we don't really listen to a person, and we're trying to keep them in a space that's not necessarily feeding their soul, and we're not driving them closer to purpose and calling. So I listened at this time, and I offered a simple book. And that book was What Color Is My Parachute? And that book by Richard Bowles really just describes, it gives steps and tips on how people can identify what are the next steps in their lives. Where are they going? What do they want? And all of these different things. She read that book over a 2-month span, came back to me, said, I'm leaving education, and I'm going to be a financial broker on Wall Street. Now, immediately, I was like, this is a huge jump. But as a former math teacher, I didn't even understand that she graduated with both a bachelor's degree in finance and a master's as a financial analyst or some degree of that nature. And this was always her calling, always her past purpose to be able to help companies on Wall Street. So I said, hey, I support it if you support it. 6 years later, she reached out to me via LinkedIn. A name that I recognize, but face changed, and everything looked so much different. The profile picture showed her 40 pounds lighter than I remember her. Lighter, joyful, full in her specific career. She had 3 kids at this point. She was married at this point. And guess what she did? She became a financial analyst that worked on Wall Street. See, it wasn't about her job. It was about pointing her to one resource that allowed her to fill her heart cup, that allowed her to fill her purpose cup, to allow her to get closer to what she's being called to do, rather than keeping her in a space that she wasn't the best fit for being able to empower and develop student leaders. And I think this is a lot of conversation. My goal is not to keep you in education. My goal is not to keep you within an organization. My goal is to help you understand that kids need people that want to be there. Kids need people that want to show up and they believe that this is purpose, this is calling, and I want to deliver, whether it's hard, whether it's challenging, whether it's raining, whether it's snowing. I want to be here in education and change the trajectory of the next generation of future leaders. Let's get to number 4. Number 4 is invite a team member to give feedback. This is an important culture tip, and I talk about this in my newest book, Contagious Culture, Creating an Ecosystem of Academic Excellence. And how I describe it in the book is when you allow a team member to give you feedback, you are communicating to them that, 1, I value you. 1, I am humble to the fact that I don't know all the answers. 3, I am committed to transforming my life or my profession or my specific behavior and action in a way so that I can show up best for my students or for my colleagues or for my team. You are building a relationship with that individual that surpasses any discomfort or uncomfortable feeling that you may have that they're giving you in that moment by them sharing where you could potentially get better. I ask my team this every single week. Hey, where can I clean this up? But you're also giving them the opportunity to grow you. And you're also learning where you can improve. One of the times when I asked a team member to give me some feedback, they said, hey, Kyle, you got to stop doing stuff last minute. When I heard this initially, I was like, well, why does it really matter? Because it happened, it got delivered, and everybody happy. But what they communicated to me on the back end, once I asked that follow-up question, is that, Kyle, you have to consider the whole team and the stress that it puts on us to deliver on something that you're doing. Yes, you may have contacts. Yes, you may have resources. Yes, you may be able to pull things off quicker. But if we're being pulled in multiple directions and you're not necessarily consider all of those directions and family, then it kind of puts a strain on us as well. It gave us the opportunity to have the open conversation, but also for me to understand the specific tasks, responsibilities, and the capacity that my team had. So then I put in and I implemented something in place. The new process was every single month we're touching base about all of the projects, all of the deliverables. 2 weeks out, we're going over the specific deliverables again and ensuring that everybody has delegated their specific portions so that we can all be on the same page. 1 week out, we're checking again, and then it's execution day. This allows us to keep communication open, to keep everything timely, to understand and assess resources, but again, to ensure that the stress levels are down so that everybody's operating at 100% productivity so that no one's cup is overflowing. Let's get to the next step. Sharing a goal session. I think one of the biggest things that I love to do is ask questions, as you know, and if you've been watching this podcast. And one of the 3 questions that I always ask is, what are the goals? What are the gaps? And what are the potential solutions? What are the goals that we're trying to achieve, let's say within the next 30 days? What is a gap that is attributing to us not being able to achieve that goal? And then what are potential solutions that we can create that can fill those gaps and allow us to be able to achieve the specific goal? I want you to ask yourself that question first. Before you present goals, I want you to look at potential gaps. What are the reasons that things can't happen? And then what are the solutions that you need, whether that's other people, whether that's additional resources, whether that is more time, whatever that is. And then I want you to have this planning session with your team. I think it's amazing when we can all come together and plan collectively, identify all of the gaps, and then now you're not missing any beats. Now there's not going to be any holes, because the goal of an organization at the beginning is to identify the holes. But over this process and this journey of team development and storming and norming and performing is to fill those holes where the whole team can operate at the highest level of efficiency and be effective in everything that they're doing. Let's go to the next culture tip. The next culture tip is intentionally listen to a concern and partner on a solution. One of the hardest tasks of leaders is to listen when people are what we call complaining, but I identify this as feedback. One of the leaders that I've worked with, amazing gentleman, he always used to say, Kyle, everything that you hear is feedback, whether good or bad. Criticism is feedback. People complaining is feedback. People gossiping is feedback. People being innovative is feedback. And now when you listen to all of this feedback, you can now assess what are the processes, the personnel, or the systems that need to be in place in order to implement, or what things need to be in place, or what things need to be implemented in order to fill those gaps, fill those holes, mitigate those losses, reduce the gossip, improve the outcomes of the specific organization. So the next time that someone is gossiping, the next time that somebody is complaining, the next time somebody is praising, I want you to listen and identify what you actually are hearing and then work with them to be able to partner on a solution. Let's go to the last tip. The last tip, which in my opinion is the most heartfelt to me, is have an honest, crucial conversation with that person that you know you're not on the same page with at work. This has probably been one of the most challenging things for me in my growth to being a director of student culture and student advancement across the school network. The reason why is because who likes having crucial conversations? Who likes having uncomfortable discussions? Who likes telling someone and sitting on the other side of the table and saying, hey, when you did X, Y, Z, it made me feel this way. I don't necessarily like when you do this, or hey, your performance isn't where it necessarily needs to be. But one of the things, again, that I talk about in my newest book, Contagious Culture, creating an ecosystem of academic excellence, is that it requires all of us to build in school systems. And my problems can be a solution if I work to partner on the solution with someone else. What I mean by that is I had this conversation with a colleague of mine. I said, look, I know that there's been some power struggles. I know that I've maybe stepped on some toes and you've maybe stepped on some toes. I know that we haven't necessarily been seeing eye to eye, or communication hasn't been as open as it needs to be. But here's my vision for the school. Here's what I want to be able to create. Here's how I want to show up. Here's the things on my docket list. And I want your support in this, because together I truly believe that we can turn around this school. I truly believe that we can transform students. I truly believe that we can become the #1 school in the state if we work together. Impact, transformation, empowerment starts with one thing, and that's the courage. The courage to be different, the courage to use your voice, the courage to celebrate a team member, the courage to say thank you, the courage to challenge the status quo, the courage to be transformative. This is another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. And my word for you today is to be courageous in your pursuit in becoming the educational leader that you were called to be. Like, subscribe, and comment below how I can help you, serve you, and empower you to show up different, to show up better, and to show up encouraged. We'll see you guys next episode.